Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil 4 VR, professional difficulty, no damage, no merchant walkthrough. This is chapter 1, and it is great to finally do a walkthrough of a VR game. Although I will say though, having to put together all the videos necessary to make this lengthier video is pretty annoying, because on the Oculus Quest 2, you can only upload to Facebook, and then from there you have to download the videos and put it onto a USB, then put it onto PlayStation, so that you can then edit from there. And I was encountering some issues with downloading part 1 of this video right here. And it was specifically from this part all the way up to the end of chapter 1.1. But it was a minor issue, and it's entirely Facebook's fault for making the download option completely obscure for some reason. But moving past that, Resident Evil 4 VR is definitely my favorite VR game right now. However, there are some things I need to discuss about this version of Resident Evil 4 compared to the console version. And obviously, the first thing you'll notice is, I'm using the Oculus Quest 2 and its controllers to do things that aren't possible in the original version of Resident Evil 4. And you notice that I'm able to move and shoot at the same time. I'm able to use my laser sight. I can actually pull out my knife and my pistol at the same time. I can pull out my shotgun as well. And this right here, I'm engaging in knife combat right now, and I need to talk about the knife a little bit, because the knife on this game, it isn't as good as the knife from Resident Evil 4. But the one good thing about the knife on this game is that you're able to knife enemies at a greater distance, to the point where they can't even hit you when you knife at the correct distance. So there are times where you will see me aim for the enemy's head, like right here. Based on the way it looks in the video, it looks like I'm pretty close to this guy, but I'm actually not. What it looks like on here is very different to how it actually looks when you're actually using the Oculus Quest 2. But I was standing quite a distance away from this guy, and I was able to knife him out of his range, so he couldn't initiate his attack animation. This only works for enemies that don't have any two-handed weapons. The guys with the pitchforks express a little bit more caution, and just wait for them to attack, then actually hit them in the head. And that's the best way to use the knife on this game. And also, another thing that they've improved on this game is the responsiveness of Leon's melee. Because there's no official aiming animation on this game, the prompt for the melee actually appears very quickly. So I'm able to press the button for melee very quickly after I actually get a stun out on an enemy. And it's really, really helpful, but there's actually a big problem associated with the melee that you're going to be seeing a lot of in this village encounter right here. And I'm going to be using only my knife for this sequence, and occasionally I'll use my pistol, but it's really only like 1 or 2 shots that I use the pistol, because the advantages provided by the VR allow me to use the knife to a greater degree compared to the original version of Resident Evil 4. Because, of course, I can move while aiming. There's no tank control-based system unless you choose to opt for it, which I can't imagine why you would want to opt for classic Leon control format, which is what the game calls that format whenever you're trying to go for the tank control option. Because this game has problems, and the tank controls were not a problem because Resident Evil 4 had the systems to balance out that aspect greatly, but in the VR version, the enemies have some additional capabilities, and also the limitations provided by yourself and with some of the problems that the VR has. You do not want to modify those issues even further by favoring a classic Leon format. And like the enemies feel a lot more aggressive in this game, and they have a lot more life. And the thing I find very confusing about that particular aspect is this only seems to apply to certain enemies and certain bosses. Like with Del Lago, for some reason, they increased Del Lago's life to an absurd degree. He takes even more of a beating than before. It's like an additional 2 minutes spent trying to shoot Del Lago, and I don't know why. It just makes the fight so dull. And the reason why Del Lago works so well in the original version of Resident Evil 4 is because it was a change to the gameplay style, but it was a change that could be easily appreciated because it didn't overstay its welcome. But this one, it overstays its welcome, and a lot of the bullshit that can be the case with Del Lago, it's magnified even further by the fact that they've increased his health to an absurd degree, and I think that's only because of the advantages provided by the VR, which is just a really stupid reason. But I'll explain Del Lago when I get the chance. And right now, you see this? This one is using a pitchfork, so I'm just going to wait for it to attack, and then I'm just going to hit her in the head, and then do the kick. And the kick, like I mentioned before, it comes out very fast because the prompt has better detection, and there's no official aiming animation on this game. And you'll see right here, I am using both my pistol and my knife at the same time. You could not do this in the original version of Resident Evil 4. And that right there, You might have noticed it a couple of times, but I've explained this so much in Resident Evil 4. But like the stumble mechanic from Resident Evil 4, where you kick an enemy into another enemy and they actually get stumbled and they just like they either stumble forward, backwards, or to the side, like that kind of mechanic. Well, for some reason on this game, the stumble mechanic only registers when you're breaking out of grabs. And the reason why the stumble mechanic from Resident Evil 4 was needed is because the enemies could attack you during the melee animation, and also the stumble mechanic allowed you to get your bearings as to where you were. So the fact that they've removed the stumble mechanic whenever you're knocking enemies into other enemies is just a really dumb design choice. And so you're forced to exert a lot more caution with the melee because the enemies are very active when trying to attack you whenever you're in a melee animation. And I don't know if the game provides you iframes slightly after a melee animation is complete, but I wouldn't take that chance at all. And it's a great example of a Resident Evil 4 design that was neglected from this game. And I can't understand how that's possible. I mean, surely they must have copy and pasted the programming from Resident Evil 4 with some minor adjustments to make this game. So how on earth did they mess up the stumble mechanic on this game? And also, for some unknown reason, they've removed certain quicktime events that help balance out certain attacks that the bosses had, because the enemies, they track you like crazy with their attacks. And you'll notice this as being a big issue when you fight U3, because they've removed a lot of the quicktime events associated with some of U3's attacks, and U3 has a lot of tracking, and there are also some other problems associated with U3 when you're first going through those carriages before the official fight begins. And they've also removed some quicktime events with Salazar as well. And overall, they made Salazar even worse in Resident Evil 4 VR. Out of all the possible ways to make Resident Evil 4 VR stand out from the original version of Resident Evil 4, why on earth would they opt to make Salazar even more shit in this version? And I need to explain Salazar when I get the chance. I'm not going to explain it right here because I need to reserve a lot of these tangents for the later videos. But moving on to other tangents, I just wanted to mention that currently I am trying to upload a playthrough of Resident Evil 4 VR right now. It's my very first playthrough of Resident Evil 4 VR. But I just decided to do this walkthrough now because I finished my playthrough. I just need to upload it to YouTube. And also because Resident Evil 4 VR released a couple of days ago, so I figured it was just a better time to release the walkthrough when the game is still like young in its age. And moving past that, there are still a couple of other things I need to explain about this game, and that right there, did you see that? I was very lucky to get that knockdown just then, and I don't know why I even tried to attack him while he was pulling out his axe. Do not try to attack the enemies unless they're actively walking towards you, because when they're actively walking towards you, it makes it a lot easier to hit them out of range, and also, you won't get any of those moments where they just cancel out of their recovery frames very quickly. Like, the enemies, they transition into a neutral state of running, or just actively attacking you very quickly. Like right there, he canceled his animation. You do not want to put up with that, especially when the knife's detection can be hit and miss at times in this version of Resident Evil 4 compared to the original version of Resident Evil 4. The knife's detection in the original version of Resident Evil 4 is a lot better than this game. Like, I get moments in Resident Evil 4 VR where even when I hit the head, or like the slashing that is generated by my knife looks like it actually connects with the head or with another body part, it doesn't register a stun. And stuns are actually something I need to talk about with this game, because they've messed up some of the stuns with regards to the feedback elicited by certain weapons. Like, the shotgun. They've done something to the shotgun to make it feel worse than the original version of Resident Evil 4. Like, you use the shotgun in the original version of Resident Evil 4, it would always make an enemy flinch. There was never any kind of circumstance where an enemy wouldn't flinch. And it knocked over a lot more enemies in one shot compared to this game's shotgun. On this game, the shotgun just seems to knock over less enemies with one shot, and there are also some weird moments where for some reason the enemies do not flinch from the shotgun. And it also feels like the shotgun has a tighter spread. It doesn't feel as wide of a spread like in the original version of Resident Evil 4, so a lot of those moments where you're relying upon the shotgun to handle those bigger crowds that is needed, because the shotgun in the original version of Resident Evil 4 really helped to balance out those encounters. It's hard to rely upon the shotgun in those situations unless you put yourself in a position where the enemies are just actively walking towards you. Ooh, that right there is a really cool feature. So this game allows you to disable the quicktime events that appear during cinematics, and the only quicktime events you'll be dealing with are the ones that are generated within the game. I mean, that right there was a quicktime event, although, like, I think it's not classed as a quicktime event on the game's part. Maybe that's the reason why it still exists. I'm not too sure why that is a thing, but I don't mind it nonetheless. I mean, I don't mind that it's there, but I'm just surprised that the game doesn't class it as a QTE. Like, it doesn't mean that all QTEs are disabled during cinematics, basically. But the ones that I imagine involve, like, a flick of your controllers or, like, the pressing of a button during cinematics, I think they've removed those QTEs, but not the ones that require you to actively move your arms like crazy. And it's just a really nice feature. I mean, I didn't mind the QuickTime events whatsoever in Resident Evil 4, but the thing I do like about the ability to skip out on those cinematic QTEs is that you're spending less time skipping cutscenes, and I imagine people speedrunning this game will be opting to enable that feature. Like, you know the Krauser fight? The Krauser fight where you're doing those QTE sequences before the fight with U3? Well, when you have that feature enabled where the QTEs are disabled, it just skips directly to the part where Ada shoots Krauser's knife, which is really nice. Like, as much as I do appreciate that cinematic, it's really nice to actually skip that, now that I think about it. But that right there is the end of Chapter 1.1, and we're not going to move on to this part right here with Chapter 1.2. But I'm showcasing the saving right here, so this is how the saving looks. This is how it looks when you go into the typewriter or when you enable a chapter save. And this is really cool. I love that you have the ability to name your save files. So you notice I have like U3 Admadudos. So I know that save file corresponds to those particular areas or those particular bosses. And it really helps in actually tracking down where my save file is for actually practicing a boss or practicing a section. And naming save files is something that I really wish more games would do. And it's so cool that this game embraces it. But right here, I'm just going to be running like crazy, and this is the power of VR right here. And when you have the control system enabled, that allows you to move and shoot at the same time. Like, I think there's at least like 3 movement styles that the game favors. I don't remember what they all are, but I favor the immersive and full motion aspect. Immersive, when it comes to the weapon select system, means that the weapons are actually attached to certain parts of your body. So the pistol is attached to the right side of my waist, the knife is attached to the left side of my chest, the grenades are attached to the right side of my chest, and I don't think anything... Oh, I'm sorry, the left shoulder, if you pull over your left shoulder, you will pick up a healing item if you've actually enabled it in your consumable slot. And I don't think there's anything else on the left side of your shoulder that you need to worry about, which is nice. But this right here is a really big change that they made to this. So, you know those moments where you're using a key item and the game just pulls up your inventory and the game just pauses? Well, they've removed that. So you have to use the key items in real time. You have to actually mash A like crazy on these doors and then select the key items when they appear on your screen. And this really changes the flow of gameplay, and it makes certain sections of Resident Evil 4 a lot harder, because when you're trying to run past the enemies, if they're right behind you, and they will run after you because they've really upped the aggression on the enemies, they will do a pretty good job at attacking you whenever you're on the door. And this got me screwed several times during my playthrough when I was trying to do that part in Chapter 4 where you're in the mine area and you're trying to gain access to that mine key that allows you to gain access to the spike trap that has those 2 Plaga Type Cs, which they've also changed in Resident Evil 4 VR. They made the Plaga Type Cs even worse, so they made one of the worst enemy types in Resident Evil 4 even worse. They no longer stand around for a couple of seconds before they actually try to grab you. They immediately try to grab you the moment they get near you. And I'm pretty sure the ambiguous hit detection on their grabs is still there, so I need to talk about that enemy when I get the chance. But I've done that whole entire section, which is a lot easier and a lot more like frenetic now that I can actually move and run at the same time. And this right here is pretty cool. They've made some of the puzzles interactive in real time. So originally you just go into a separate menu and just press like up and right to do the puzzle right there. But now you gotta actually move that orb by holding the grab button on your controller. And that is pretty cool. So they made some of the puzzles like a little bit more interesting based on their interactivity. It's a minor thing, but it's cool nonetheless. And now right here, this is something you would not be able to do on the original version of Resident Evil 4. But I'm just going to be running and shooting, and these 4 enemies that are right in front of me are not going to be a problem. They're normally a problem on the original version of Resident Evil 4 because you're forced to stop in order to actually shoot your gun. And then this right here, you gotta actually pull on that in order to access the door, rather than actually pressing a button, which caught me by surprise. There's definitely a lot of moments in your first playthrough of Resident Evil 4 VR that will catch you by surprise if you're used to the original version of Resident Evil 4. Now this right here, you have to take this path. If you just try to do the exact same thing in my original walkthrough where I just ran directly for the door, the enemies will catch up to you very quickly, and they will throw their axes when they're off camera. In the original version of Resident Evil 4, if the enemies were off camera or you were actively like moving like away from them, they never ever threw their axes. They've changed that on this game. They've really like changed up certain parameters with the enemy AI, and they now have the ability to throw their weapons whenever they are off camera, which really changes the flow of certain encounters. If you're so used to relying upon the camera in Resident Evil 4 to balance out certain encounters, which the reason why it was designed like that was because it was the first over-the-shoulder game ever made, so they had to put in some kind of safeguard to ensure that people could actually like get through these encounters without any problems. And it was also a necessary way to balance out the enemies, because the enemies on Resident Evil 4 can be very bullshit at times, but there's a reason why you get iframes on your melee. There's a reason why the enemies are slower when they're off camera in the original version of Resident Evil 4. Because Resident Evil 4 has certain limitations and certain problems that get in the way of good balance, which is why they had to favor those kind of systems. And I'm guessing because of the liberties provided by the VR technology, they took certain liberties with actually removing some of those safeguards. And while I do understand why they did that, I just feel like some of the encounters in Resident Evil 4 are made even more bullshit because of these changes. But I'll explain them when I get the chance. Chapter 1, it doesn't have a lot of bullshit. And here's me just playing around with my pistol and my knife. Like, I'm trying to mimic the sprint animation that Ethan does in Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village, because I'm really attached to those kind of animations that Ethan does. It's just something that it's a habit with me when it comes to first-person games. But this right here, she's just always going to point at you, and then you need to wait until this guy tries to throw his axe or jump over to your side before jumping over, and then it's all a breeze from here. And this is really the part of the Chapter 1 where you really start to notice some of the negative changes that they've made to Resident Evil 4 VR. It's later on when we encountered Del Lago, which I've already explained is just a very shit fight in Resident Evil 4 VR because they gave him way too much life. Oh, that right there. Always make sure that you have an empty hand in your left hand or your right hand. You can set the dominant hand. You can either be left-handed or right-handed. I go for right-handed because I'm used to it with Leon, and it just feels right. Oh, also, something I forgot to mention about the knife. You might notice that I mainly do the reverse slash, where, like, for instance, when I'm holding it in my right hand, I go from left to right rather than going from right to left. You want to do that with the knife. Like, there are some design philosophies from the original version of Resident Evil 4 that the developers tried to honor with this version of Resident Evil 4, and really just brings down the quality of this game severely. Like, the game is very strict on you doing the reverse slash with the knife rather than doing like the normal slashes where if you hold the knife in your right hand you go from right to left. That's like a forward slash, but if you don't specifically do the reverse slash, the knife just has some really weird detection and it just doesn't detect at times. So that's something you're gonna have to bear in mind. And also, don't think for 1 second that just because you can knife like crazy in this game that the game is going to register all those hits. The game has a time limit on when it actually registers the knife's detection, and I think it's equal to the speed of the knife in the original version of Resident Evil 4 when you were using the Ditman glitch. So you gotta make sure that you knife at the same rate as what Leon knifes at whenever he's using the Ditman glitch in the original version of Resident Evil 4, because if you're knifing too fast, you'll miss out on a lot of those hits, and the knife will just not detect properly, so you gotta bear that in mind. And you see that was the reverse slash that I did just then. That's the one that has the better detection. And you want to go a little bit more horizontal than that whenever you're trying to use the knife on this game to ensure it has better detection. But this is Del Lago right now, and like I mentioned before, this fight is fucking awful because they just decided to arbitrarily increase this guy's health, and it just makes it a very dull fight, and some of the bullshit that's already apparent with Del Lago is just going to impact you even more because there's so many more opportunities for Del Lago to be very bullshit. Like, this is not respecting the survival horror aspect. This is just turning it into a dragged-out scenario. It's a very dull fight, and it's just repeat this pattern over and over again until he actually dies. Like, why would they favor this option? He already has so much life on normal difficulty, and it feels like he has the same amount of life on professional difficulty. Like, it took roughly like 15 hits, I would say, on the original version of Resident Evil 4, and you're already throwing your harpoons very quickly. But this one, it feels like it's 45 hits with this harpoon gun. And right here, the game swaps between first person and third person whenever the boat is rocking, thanks to Del Lago. And it seems a little disorienting, but it is very helpful at times whenever the game goes into that cutscene. But the times where you don't want that cutscene to happen, you're trying to aim your harpoon gun at him, and you have a clear shot, and then the cutscene plays for a second, and then you go back into first person, and then the cutscene happens again. Like, it just leads to a lot of annoyance when that kind of stuff happens. And also, watch this. The cutscene plays, but look how quickly Del Lago, like, goes down. So, because Del Lago is technically teleporting whenever those cutscenes trigger, after you do that little sequence there where you gotta find where Del Lago is, Del Lago is able to attack you very quickly after those cutscenes, so you gotta make sure you turn in the right direction, and you really don't have enough time to really see where Del Lago is going. Sometimes when he submerges, he'll go left, other times he'll go right. There's no real consistency with it, and it can be very bullshit at times, but I feel like going to the left is a little bit better, but there's always that rare occasion, and it can happen because the fight drags on for such a long time, where he chooses to go on your left-hand side, and you'll just get hit by him very easily. I failed this sequence once, and this was my second attempt at it, and I managed to pull it off. But see, look how quickly he submerges. And look at that just then, that right there was so close. Like, I could barely see under the water where exactly he was, but that was so close, and I was very, very lucky that I was going in the right direction. Like, it looked like he was going to be able to attack me when I was going left, but he was actually, like, slightly in the middle, and I didn't get hit. Like, there's so many more opportunities for that to happen because of how much life they've given this guy. They've taken a short but sweet fight from the original version of Resident Evil 4 and just made it into a slogfest. They've made this guy almost on the same proportions as Moreau. Moreau was such a pathetic fight in Resident Evil Village. That just seems to be the trend with a lot of these bosses that new Capcom seems to be favoring, and, you know, it's stuff like that that really made me realize that Resident Evil 4 VR was not designed by old Capcom, it's designed by new Capcom. And, you know, these kind of bullshit designs and these kind of lazy designs, they almost make me wonder what Resident Evil 4 Remake will be like, if it is true that Resident Evil 4 Remake is being, like, remade. Like, that right there just doesn't make any sense for Resident Evil 4 Remake to be a thing if they're going to be releasing Resident Evil 4 VR. Like, if you've not seen my Resident Evil Village walkthrough, and you've not seen the numerous times where the game has just really expressed its dull tendencies, or if you haven't seen what Salazar is like on the original version of Resident Evil 4 when you don't have the rocket launcher, they're bad. They're really bad. It's pathetic that they would decide to favor this kind of model. Oh, and also right here, you'll notice that oftentimes I'm looking back in that other direction I was looking at, like right near that gate. That just seems to be a thing that happens in the VR version, where Del Lago seems to emerge from that side of the lake. That right there was very close. You see that's the gate I'm talking about. That's the side that he seems to come up on whenever he's doing this whole attack of trying to sneak up on me. So try to look in that direction and keep track of him, and you should be fine. But that's the end of Del Lago. That's the end of Chapter 1. And you see right there, I did not have to do the whole quick time event of actually cutting off the rope. It just skipped directly to that whole moment where Leon survives. That right there is really cool with the ability to disable the QTEs within the cutscenes. But it's just a shame that this game has some other problems, and they've added problems that really didn't exist in the original version of Resident Evil 4. And they've made certain encounters feel a lot worse in this version of Resident Evil 4 compared to the original version. And even though I have done a walkthrough of the original version of Resident Evil 4, there's still a lot to talk about because of the amount of things that they've changed with Resident Evil 4 VR compared to the original version. Like, I have to talk about the new mechanics that they've introduced with Resident Evil 4 VR. I have to talk about some of the changes that they've made to Resident Evil 4 VR to make it better or worse than the original version of Resident Evil 4, and so much more. So this is the start of this walkthrough. Stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.